Let's continue with the show now. And up next, we're going to go back to War Memorial Stadium, 1979, 1982, and welcome in a record holder, Rick Lancelotti, and a man who is also part of the Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame, still on the Bison broadcast team, Duke McGuire. Glad you guys could join us. So, Rick, you and Duke have to follow Bob Costas. So that's a tall chore to be certain. But you also had to usher, and your team, baseball back into Buffalo on a professional level in 1979 after it had departed in June of 1970. What was it like for you pirate farmhands coming in?
Well, am I on now? Am I unmuted? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. I was, 23 years old, coming in, leaving A-ball and coming into AA, where it's such another standard of playing, because the whole idea is if you succeed in AA, then maybe you have a shot. And so when we came in there, usually playing in much smaller stadiums, and all of a sudden we walk into that place and it's like, I mean, everybody says like how beat up it was and a rock pile, but it was a massive stadium. And it was very intimidating to play in such a big place, especially with no people watching.
Yeah.
For a while anyway. And then the fans started coming around, and it just got to be so, it was like one of those big highlights you wait for in your career, to walk out onto a field that's surrounded by a full stadium instead of mostly in and out kind of a stadium where you see an A-ball and rookie ball.
You experienced, though, that not many fans at a big place later on at Aloha Stadium in Honolulu.
Well, basically the same thing. It seats about 80,000, and you'll put a couple thousand people in there, and it's kind of like, nowadays when you're watching baseball on TV, the cardboard people, there weren't many out there. But you could
hear a homie talk about what it was like seeing baseball come back.
Yeah, it was kind of a surprise, really. It happened very suddenly. The late Pete Caleri, he was found out that there was going to be an opening in the Eastern League. They got a hold of Don Colpoys, and Colpoys got a hold of Mayor Jimmy Griffin, and in a very short period of time, they put it all back together, which was incredible, really.
It was a very short period of time. It was not easy, but the work was like 24/7.
Oh yeah, I mean they had a lot of work to do at the stadium, because obviously it had been not used for like a decade, and so they had to paint it. They had to take out a lot of broken seats. They had the field in itself. They had a lot of work to do. Lance probably figured it's better than I do how the field was, but it was nice. Some years they had the screen up in right field for the left-handed hitters. Some years they didn't have it up there. And it was a great place to go, really, and do games from and see games. And you walk up to the press box and you saw the same 15 people there all the time. The crew behind home plate there, the home plate crew with Ruby and old Pete, those guys. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
So, Rick, at what point did you feel you're going to get on that hot streak that allowed you to hit 41 out?
Pete, I got to be honest with you. I was having such a bad April that
he wants the all-time home run leader in minor leagues.
I think we have somebody's mic that should be muted, but I'm sorry, Rick.
Am I back on?
Yeah.
Okay. What happened was when I joined the club and I'm out there and I'm trying to do my thing, and I had the worst April on record, and I only had, going into May, I think I had one home run, and Steve Demeter, our manager, says to me, "Look, I'm going to move you down to 8." I'm like, "Oh, please don't do that." So, I mean, I shouldn't have been in the lineup. I was doing that bad, but I did this for a few games. And I went back in his office and I begged him to go back to the 4 spot. He goes, I can't put you in there. You're not hitting. I says, well, I'm not hitting because you're putting me there. So we're going back and forth in this. And he had Alfredo Torres, our left fielder, hitting 4th. And he goes, well, let me talk to Alfredo. I said, I already did. he hates hitting fourth. He wants to go back to 8. He goes, you did not talk to him. I go, yeah, I did. I said, I can't hit down there. I said, you got to put me back. And then he let me think about it. So I'm playing catch before the game starts in front of our dugout, and he comes walking out with the lineup card, and he sticks it right in my face. And he goes, there, you happy? And I looked and I said, he had me hitting fourth again. And I'm like, yeah. And then all of a sudden I started hitting like crazy, and I didn't know what came over me. I think I was at the end of my rope, and the only way to go was like, I'm going down swinging here. And then about 3 weeks later, he called me in his office. He goes, all right, you're fine now. I just wanted to tell you, you were that close to going back to A-ball. And I'm like, oh, I knew it, because I was like doing really bad. But somehow, I don't know. And then all of a sudden I had that kind of a year.
Yeah.
And, you have a year like that, and you think, oh, everything was great, and I got no regrets. I got one regret in that entire year was, you get to 41, and, anything like after 20, you're a happy guy, because you figure, I just got to get to 20 and maybe I'll have a job next year. And so now I'm up in this 41 range, and I can't get that 42nd home run, because now I'm tied with the record, and I couldn't do it. And my last at bat was I flew out to right field, and I just jogged down to first base, and I stood at first base, and because it was in the papers a lot that I was going for the record. And I stood on first base, and I just turned around, and everybody stood up, and I just I just felt like saying, sorry that I couldn't do it, because I wanted to do it for them. Me, after 20, I'm good to go. But I just felt really bad because I wanted to do it so bad for the city, for the team, for everybody, But I'll never forget that moment, standing on first base and looking back.
Tremendous insight there. Duke, you were around the ball club from 79 on to the current day. What do you remember most about Lance's season?
I started right after the 79 season. I started working for the club. I had been to a few games in 79. Don Colpoys was the general manager. He put me on, and then he had an aneurysm, and I'm there with a new guy, Jerry Kissel. He wasn't there the year before, and I thought, oh my God, we're going to get fired here, because we have no idea what's going on, because Don was in the hospital. He was in bad shape. So we finally got things together, but it was so different. The times were different. I mean, like Fred Brining in 79, Lance will remember this. He pitched opening day, and he pitched a great ball game. It wasn't five and dive, even on opening day for those guys. Those guys were out there, and they were throwing. Dave Drabecki. No, Dave Drabecki. I mean, he was throwing, and the poor guy. And then it was a. I hate to say it was an old style baseball, but that's the way. I kind of like it back then. It was back then. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of characters on the team. I know Lance played with Bubba Evans there. I guess he had a snake. He had a pet snake, and there were some crazy guys, and it was fun, I mean, guys weren't making billions of dollars back then. In the big leagues, they weren't making a whole lot of money then, and in the minor leagues, it was like terrible. But guys just loved to play ball, and they wanted to play, and they played hard because they liked to play, and they want to play again the next year. So they needed a new place to play, and they wanted to have a good season. They wanted to play well, and it was just, I think it was just a different style baseball back then.
Bubba Evans took his snake in a basket on the bus trips, Rick?
Bubba would take that snake everywhere. And him and Jimmy Smith, another pitcher. Smitty, one year, I think he went 10-0. But his 8-0 and his 10-0 and his ERA was 8. That's not an easy thing to do.
No.
So he would come in, he'd come into the dugout, and in the first 3 innings, he'd have they give up 8 and 9. We'd be down 8-9 runs. It's 8-0, and he'd go, all right, fellas, that's it. They're not getting any more. So you just might as well go out there and swing the bat and have a good time. And he'd be laughing like it was no big deal. And sure enough, we'd get 10, 12, 15 runs. And he went 10-0 that year. And the next year they released him. I mean, when guys win, right? Yeah. And, you know, like Duke says, it was a different style. You know, they took a lot of pride in going 9 innings and, you know, never coming out of a ball game hurt, you know, not hurt. I'm not coming out because, you know, you're afraid that if you come out, somebody goes in for you and all of a sudden they start hitting and they kind of Wally pip you and then you're done. And, you know, you just can't afford to have that happen, you know, because you're making the big dough. You're making $600 a month, right? And you only get paid for 4.5 months. So, you know, people thought we were all rich because we were playing pro ball. Like, no,
Right.
just missed. That's why, you know, you live in an apartment with 5 guys and you're eating pizza every night.
But it was
Those are
good
the days.
pizza.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Buffalo, it was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much. Rick, still Rick Lancelotti's Buffalo School of Baseball. Thank you for, did you cut short a lesson to join us on this program tonight?
I did. I told some kid I didn't like him anymore. I'm leaving.
Hit the bricks, kid.
So much, Rick.
That's right. Get out of here. I got to be on TV with Bob Costas.
There you go. Thank you much, Rick.
All right. I want to say hello to the family. Debbie,
Yes.
kids, love you guys all. You guys too. It's good
Great to
seeing
see you, Rick. Great to see you, Duke. And now
Be safe.
we're going to bring in a Western New Yorker who was the winning pitcher in the last game played at War Memorial Stadium in 1987, in August of that year. It was the Bisons against the Nashville Sounds. The lefty was a guy from Cardinal O'Hara High School. His name, Billy Shearer. Billy, are you with us?
He's having a smoke.
Yeah, I am. I'm back. I'm back.
Okay, very good. Let's get Billy up here on screen if we can. I mean, his voice is delightful, no question.
Oh, I'm sure. I hope I've got it right. I've got the picture right in front. I see you.
Okay. Well, let's talk with you about that whole situation because that game turned
Michelle.
out to be a bit of a turning point in your life off the baseball field too, as you got called in to win that game, over Ernie Camacho and the Bisons on that August Sunday afternoon.
I can't remember who I was facing at that time, Ernie Camacho. It's, you know, you're talking about 1987, but
Yes, sir.
I do remember the story because when you get back to Buffalo, anytime you're in the concession area, they've got a picture or one of the signs that says "Town on his own." Billy Shearer won the last game. Oh, there you go.
There.
So I always go by it and I said, "Look at my name's on the wall here at at Pilot Field," because so I used to always argue who I got the last win at the old rock pile. And I always tell that to Carl Willis, and Carl would say, I said, Dibble got the save. He goes, no. Dibble didn't get the save. I got the save. And so we argue back and forth, but Carl, you have the stats. So I'm sure that Carl probably officially did get the save the last game, the win in the rock pile.
What was it like for you to come back and pitch in your hometown?
Well, the first time I went back there was in 1980 when I was in Waterbury, AA with the Reds. And so as a kid growing up, my dad was a wire chief at Western Union, so he very seldom went and did the coverage for the Bills. He was one of those that he'd pass it up. But when he did go, he would allow me to go to the game. And it was almost like sitting at Tiger Stadium. He said, just sit wherever you can sit. And I'd sit behind a pillar. And that's where Mike and me used to always argue. What was OJ's first uniform number? It was number 36. And Mike, Billoni and me would always argue. And he realized there's a picture of him against the Lions. OJ did wear number 36 and immediately wore number 32. So I have so much fond memories as a kid, going there and playing in 80, thinking of my dad. And then eventually, you talk about coincidental to be able to win the last game at War Memorial, being a kid from born and raised in Tonawanda. I put that up with so many other things that I've went through in my life that, whether it's talking about high school days or whether it's talking about the World Series in 84, I still bring it up as, well, you know what? I know who won the last game at War Memorial. It was yours truly. So I truly get a kick out of that.
And speaking of reuniting with some high school friends, you did that weekend, did you not?
I did. That's a great story too. Unfortunately, in our business, because how crazy it is, especially mine, you unfortunately don't always get married to the first gal you marry. And so I saw Michelle come down to War Memorial and she had a high school ring. And And I said, so there's a redhead over here. Billy Landrum goes, hey, there's some little babe over here. I said, well, let me see who it is. And here's Michelle sitting there going, I know you have a boy, from first marriage. I gave her a high school ring. Give this to your boy. I said, well, we're all going to Giovanni's in Tonawanda. So my parents, my friends and everything else were going to be there. So eventually Michelle and her family came too. So as we know the story, I went back to Nashville, and next thing you know, I'm getting called back to Cincinnati. And I get walking papers in Cincinnati from my ex-wife, and I signed them. My sister said, don't do it, but I did. And I called Michelle, and her dad answered the phone, who's a retired iron worker, so I don't really want to mess with him a lot. And I said, is Michelle's there? And she goes, well, who is it? I said, this is Billy Shear. So Michelle was working at some kind of corporate banking. I said, quit your job, come on down to Cincinnati. And now we know the story 32 years later. She has to live with me and live off my dreams come true, even still today. So
A tremendous
it's a blessing.
Billy, tell our audience for whom you're working now.
Still working for the Chicago White Sox. This is my glorious number 19th year working with Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn. And unfortunately, after this whole year that we had to go through, we watched games on TV like everybody else. And I'm one of the blessed few that still survived with all the cuts that have gone on in baseball. But I'm full, and this is my number 45th year in baseball. So I just got to go a few more ticks. And, it'll be a hard day when I say I'm going to walk away. Somebody said, you'll never walk away. You'll be one of those old timers like, Cy or somebody else still floating around at ballparks. But yeah, I've been blessed to be with the White Sox for 19 years.
Maybe we'll soon have to do a book about this thickness, the 45 plus years of Billy Shear in professional baseball.
Oh God, Pete, it's too long, too many cities, too many places, too many releases. I was laughing about even the times of being in Dominican or Venezuela or playing in Italy or Mexico. And I said, now I sit here in Arizona because I finally can spell the state. So as much as I live here in Arizona, we still have our place in Clarence. I still call myself a Buffalonian.
Absolutely. Bill, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. Take care, Pete.
Thank you, Billy.
Okay, Michael.
Thanks, Bill.
Hey, Rick, you're my favorite. Rick, you're my favorite.
Pete, if you had another 30 seconds, you could ask Billy if we ever face each other.
That's a good. Someone asked that question.
He hasn't gone away yet.
He boasts about it because I was bouncing around and he was in Pawtucket. He took a 3-2 pitch. It probably was a ball. He boasts about that. He was such a selective hitter, and we know that's not the truth. He either hit the ball 450 feet or he struck out.
Billy, it was a foot outside. It was a foot outside.
Lance, where did you take the pitch?
Well, wait a minute.
I took it
before we leave. I have this shirt on in honor of Rick Lancelotti.
Hey.
I'm wearing the Buffalo School of Baseball.
Attaboy, Billy.
Goodbye, boys. I got NFL football to watch. I have no more time.
All right. So there you have pitcher, batter, the face-off as they go. Now we go to Greg Brown, and Greg has
1 second.
What's that?
Peter?
Yeah.
Let me just introduce this segment real quickly, if we could.
Yeah.
We're honored to have over 150 guests on this virtual book launch tonight. And if you'd like to purchase a book, Pete, hold that book up for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Visit bisons.com or a number of retail outlets, including Jeff Cizek's Bases Loaded Sports Collectibles here in Cheektowaga. We'd like to welcome one of the guests who is on here is Eric Brady, who wrote a tremendous story this morning on Bob Costas at buffalonews.com. And also cartoonist Mike Resigliano is watching this evening, and he drew the cartoons that are on the inside front and inside back covers in the book. I'd also like to welcome Rich Baseball Operations President Mike Buchkowski, the current general manager Anthony Sprague. He's an undefeated general manager after one season. And former Bison associates Brad Del Barbara, Ken Lehner, and John Lambert, and their veteran ticket manager, Mike Parita, among many, many others who are watching this evening. When Bob Rich made me his first associate in 1983, my first hire was Marta Hashevsky, whom on Friday, the 13th of May, 1983, took a phone call from a movie site director named Mel Bourne, And that phone call led to the filming of the movie The Natural here in Buffalo. You could read all about it in the Seasons of Buffalo Baseball, 1857 to 2020. But to tell us about it tonight, here's Greg Brown and Marta Hishevsky.
Mike, thanks. It's a treat to talk to and see Marta again. I worked for Marta for 5 years while with the Buffalo Bisons, and she looks as great as ever. Marta, take us back, if you would, to that May 13th, 1983 day when you get a call from a guy named Melbourne.
Yeah, well, it almost didn't get shot here, because we get this call. People were calling us. We got hundreds of calls every single day, and everybody wanted to sell you something or pitch you something. It was overwhelming, and so I get this phone call, and this guy says, hi, like real fast talker. Hi, this is Melbourne. I'm a creative director for TriStar Pictures. And I'm like, I'd never heard of TriStar Pictures before. It was their first year, I think, or their first major production. He keeps going. We're associated with Paramount Pictures, and we're producing this baseball movie with. He goes into Robert Redford and Glenn Close and on. And he stops and says, I'm in Louisville, and I want someone here. The clubhouse manager tells me that you have a old ballpark in Buffalo. And I said, oh, yes, we do have an old ballpark. He said, you don't still have wooden seats, do you? And, and Duke and some of those guys can attest to it. Yes, we do have wooden seats. How many do you have? About 30,000 of them. And they were not in great shape. I mean, they were 50-year-old seats, right? Since the place was first constructed as a WPA project. He turned on a dime and said, I'm going to be there. I'm taking a flight right now. Have someone pick me up. I'm like, okay. So Michael came back from lunch, and we had this conversation, and we were looking at each other going, is this guy legitimate? And we didn't have Google, so you couldn't Google it and say TriStar Pictures, what is this? So Michael took the information up to Bob, and they called around, and sure enough, he was legitimate, and they came in and ended up shooting this great movie at War Memorial Stadium.
Well, this book we're talking about, of course, tonight, The Seasons of Buffalo Baseball, 1857 to 2020, and it is such a great read. And this particular section where they played Buffalo Fields of Dreams, The Rock Pile Goes Hollywood, goes into detail about Marta's story. And Marta, from that point on, the Bison just said, whatever they want, they get, right?
Right. And that's how it happened. I mean, we had sold all of our ads. We were, Mike, you started in January, I think, when Bob bought the team, and I started a few weeks after. And Duke was there, and Don Colpoys, and we're putting this season together so quickly, to get started in 3 months, really, after Bob had bought the team. And we literally they tore everything down, all of our signs. They put up old signs. They put up an old scoreboard, and really it was just completely turned over to them. And they're probably people, I mean, of course you've seen pictures of Duke in the Knights uniform, but there are probably others that are on this call right now that were extras in the film. People came down and were extras in the movie, and of course they fit in cardboard, pictures of others. But yeah, a lot of people were involved.
Marta, you're absolutely right. And one of the interesting things was we went to the airport that Monday. We called him back on Friday, and he said he'll be there Monday morning. Yeah. So we go to the airport, we pick him up in a limo, and we get off the 33 coming down Dodge, and he opens up the roof, and he's like looking, oh my God. And he gets on his phone to Barry Levinson, the director, and said, we found it. So right. The limo comes into the old stadium, and remember, you could drive right in there. Mm-hmm. He gets off, and there's a waiting team of, Bob and Bill Giesel and the city officials, walks right past him out onto the field. and it's like he's almost, praying at home plate and says, "We found it." Gets on his phone. There it is. There's home plate. Gets on his phone and calls Robert Redford and said, "We found the stadium." And then he turned around and got into conversations, and the city had just painted all these seats. And he said, they're going to be painted gray, and I want all those signs down. And one of the guys from the city said, "Well, wait a minute, and Bill Giesel or Bob gives me this look, and I just went over to the fellow and says, whatever they want, they get, and they did.
Yeah, it was an exciting time for sure, and Buffalo needed it at that time. We had just come off of Bethlehem Steel closing. It was about the lowest point that Buffalo had been in, and the stadium was one that had been in a neighborhood where there had been riots in the late 60s. So 10 years beforehand. So it was a real shot in the arm to the organization and to Buffalo. It now made it okay to be there. It made it okay for people to come down to that ballpark, that old ballpark. We could all tell stories, anybody who worked there, about chunks. They called it the rock pile, literal chunks of cement falling out of the ceiling in that place. But it was a heck of an experience, that's for sure.
Some great stories in this book, including that particular chapter about the details of the natural. And then you move, Marta and Mike, from the rock pile to Pilot Field.
Right.
And, talk about a shot in the arm. Marta, you and Mike obviously played such a key role in some key events. I mean, Marta, you were instrumental in, well, we talked to Bob Costas earlier about the Old Timers game, the AAA All-Star game, the Friday Night Bash. Talk about that.
Yeah, getting people to the ballpark in a minor league ballpark is often about the events, right? The other things that go on at the ballpark, making it family friendly, making it a place to be in the summer, and that was our brand. That's what we did. We turned Bison baseball into a place you wanted to be with your friends and your family, and we did it over and over again, 72 games in a row, every year. I was there 20 years. Mike was there almost as long, and Friday Night Bashes became a great tradition. I think they still are. I saw that, some of the people, Kenny and some of those people who were part of that, everybody was involved in that process. Friday Night Bashes, I think, still are among the best and the biggest events that they do. That was something that we developed out of War Memorial. We did those fish fries, in the tent, right over, the fence.
Marta, I think Marta Hishevsky was a 1991 Rawlings Woman Executive of the Year, but in 1988, Mindy Rich won that award.
That's
Marta,
right.
talk about the great influence that Mindy, who now is vice chairman of the entire company with her husband, Bob, the role she played in helping with her great marketing background and her love of baseball.
That's right. That's right. Mindy was a great partner, for sure, to have involved in that whole process. I mean, she had a vision for what she thought it could be. And we drove towards that. We all worked together to make that happen. And, we laugh about it sometimes and say, maybe we were so young at the time that we didn't know enough that we thought we might lose. We knew we were going to keep going. We were going to have a great time at it. We worked super hard. Our families were all involved in the process. Mike's family, my family. My husband, Greg, ran the scoreboard back at War Memorial, and the girls were involved. If we needed bodies to be contestants, Martika or Shannon were contestants, but they knew they couldn't win. They had to lose. Right. So, and you talked about the Old Timers games, and, Greg and Pete and all those people you mentioned, plus more. We had some of the real top players, and they wanted to come back again and again, both to War Memorial and to Pilot Field, years after.
Well, Marta, thank you very, very much. And Marta still lives around here in West Falls, and they have their own business, and we appreciate it, Marta. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It was fun. Thanks a lot.
Great to see you, Marta.
Good to see you, Marta.
When Pilot Field opened, Greg, in 1988, the Bisons were the AAA affiliate of your Pittsburgh Pirates. We knew our catcher back then was destined for a big league career, as he was a hard-nosed, dedicated ball player who gave it his all every time he stepped onto the field. The player who was in the record books for hitting the ballpark's first home run, which occurred in a 1-0 opening day victory at Pilot Field. Please welcome Tom Prince, who is now a AAA manager for the Detroit Tigers AAA affiliate in Toledo. Joining him is another catcher and one of the 2 players who wore the Bison uniforms at both War Memorial Stadium and the downtown ballpark when he was with us in 1991 and 1992. Brian Dorsett. They are also members of the Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame. And Pete and Greg, take it away.
Glad to do that. And guys, it's great to see both of you. And Greg, you worked with Tom Prince, not just in Buffalo, but in Pittsburgh. And that had to be a special, special thing for you.
Well, for me, certainly. And it's great to see both Tom and Brian and part of this launching this event, the Zoom launch of the book and the great stories that are in the Seasons of Buffalo Baseball talk about, and there's a section of the Hall of Famers, and we have 2 of them here in Tom Prince and Brian Dorsett. And I'll ask Princey, because Pete, I appreciated Tom. Tom got into the Hall of Fame before Brian, and I appreciated what those guys did so much, watching them go from the big leagues to AAA Buffalo and at times back and forth, and what Tom meant to the Bisons. I had to be there. So I took a rare game off as a Pirate broadcaster to go up for that induction ceremony. And I remember how important that was to Princey. I know Brian will talk about this too, but Princey, what the Bisons and Buffalo meant to you in your career?
Well, first of all, great to see you guys. And there's a lot of faces on here I haven't seen in a long time. I see Kenny Lehner. I talked to Boots a little bit, Mike Billoni. I mean, you guys are awesome. I mean, that's what the game of baseball is all about. You're asking me what Buffalo meant to me. Well, if you look at what Bob and Mindy Rich did in Buffalo the time that I was there, I mean, they started you on a path to a lot of good things happening in your life. That's for sure. It's the journey through the game of baseball. It's the relationships that I have with all you guys. I mean, that's what baseball means to me. And it all started really in Buffalo. So I've really held a pretty special place for me in my heart.
Hey, Princey, how about you hit a ton of home runs in your career? And I know too many for us to document now, all the home runs you hit in the big leagues and the minor leagues. But the one that stands out has to be that first ever at Pilot Field.
No doubt. I mean, kind of what Bob was saying, it's about the team. You talk about the game of baseball now. If you look back at that game, opening day, Buffalo, New York, it was probably, 30-some degrees?
Yes.
Both pitchers went 8 innings. They probably threw over 150 pitches. I mean, you don't see that kind of stuff. But, we won the game. Bob Patterson, Gideon, I did hit a home run off Knutson, and we won the game 1-0. But, I mean, that was awesome.
And Bob Patterson was carrying a no-hitter into the late innings as well. So
yeah, he didn't shake me off. Dorsett knows how that is. Them pitchers never shake me and Brian off,
Love that. Brian, great to see you. And you're in the holiday spirit there, I can see as well. You were, like was mentioned by Mike Billoni earlier, you played for the Bisons both at War Memorial Stadium and at then Pilot Field. No comparison really there, but
Tell
what
them to let Greg Peterson in.
Baseball fans at War Memorial?
I just remember how great, and hello to everybody as well. Princey, great seeing you, man. I haven't seen you forever. But I saw a lot of people back in Buffalo, and love being with all of you on here. What great traditions. But I think the people were just genuine baseball fans. That's what I remember. I remember packing it out, 35,000+ fans in one of the last games to ever be played there. that was tremendous, the old stadium, and it's got such history. And now you really respect it more as you're older and look back on all the history of what went on there in football and everything else as well. But I just remember the fans were so genuine, and then, to be able to go on to Pilot Field was pretty special as well.
Not to mention driving in 102 runs that full season you had at Pilot Field. That was just a remarkable record of consistency.
Yeah, that was one of those things where Bombi, he put me in the lineup every day, and, somewhere, whether I was playing first base or DH or catching, when Tommy was around, I was probably playing first or DHing more. And I just loved being in the lineup. I was mad if I wasn't in there, because I was swinging it well, and just loved playing in that atmosphere. We had a great team. Just guys were just phenomenal. We just 1 through 9, and even off the bench, just a lot of talent, a lot of fun guys to play with, big league atmosphere. And I think that's the thing that Princey and I, coming out of the big league atmosphere and coming down there, was certainly easier for us to play there. It was first class, and made you feel like, you're in the show. And so just love that whole season. Just wish we could have capped it off with the championship.
No doubt.
What do you remember about the ovation you got when you were standing at first base after driving in the 100th run?
That was special because, when you think about getting to that level, with RBIs, I just truly felt like that was something I always wanted to experience. And then as I got closer, and then for them to give me a standing ovation and tip of the cap was one of the best experiences I've ever had, big leagues or not. It was, and Buffalo just has that special place in my heart. Getting to the Hall of Fame was so special this past year. And the fans have just been so welcoming all along, and just really meant so much.
Princey, Brian talks about Bombi, referring to Mark Bombard, and one of the great things about minor league baseball, the players, the people that you meet, sometimes the characters on and off the field, and that special camaraderie that you guys had. That was a really good team. Now, you and Brian, of course, played a lot of games in the big leagues, but I imagine not just Pilot Field and the Bisons stand out, but that team, that era probably stands out in your professional career, both you and Brian, how good that club was.
Oh yeah. I mean, like you said, Bombi led us. He was a character and everything like that. Dorsett, like he said, what a great year he had. I think there was 20 homers. I think he hit that year too. It's good to see him. I haven't seen him. He still looks big as ever. But it was just one of those special years. You go through the Rick Reed and guys that were on the team back then. We just had a good bond and a lot of good things happening. And you just didn't finish it off the way we'd like to finish it, with a championship. That's the things that you always want to do in the game. And as I said before, it's the relationships you go through and the journeys through your life. Brian said it there. You look back as we get older. I mean, it's unbelievable of what I had the opportunity to play their parts of 4 years. You drew over 1 million fans. I mean, being a part of something like that, and then the teams, the people that you meet. You're going to have Morris on here later. What an awesome time.
Hey, Tommy, just keep us in mind when they finally come up with the new AAA league. If Toledo happens to be in the division with the Bisons, keep us in mind of the great times you had here when you bring your Toledo team to Buffalo.
Oh yeah, I definitely will. I've talked to Booch about that, and he always wants to come over and talk to the winning manager. And I said he'll be in my office a lot, and that's fine.
All right. Hey, before we end this, Princey, Pete Weber has a special call that we want to play here. Mark, take it away.
2-0 pitch, ripped deep to left field. Standing up back there is Walters. This ball is gone. Put Tom Prince down in the history books. He rips his first of the year. The Bisons are out in front, 1-0.
Pete, there are two things that I think about. Well, first of all, of course, that home run by Princey. Princey, how about your walk-up song? And the other thing is, and Princey talked about Brian. I remember Brian, you stand in this book, brings back these memories as you leaf through it, the stories. When Brian came to the plate, it was like a man amongst boys. He was this huge figure, and he would crush the ball. Anytime he put barrel on it, it was crushed. You know, they talk about exit velocity now. I'd love to know what Brian's was in Buffalo. But Pete, we talked about this a lot. How about Cool Jerk for Tom Prince? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, I got to find this out, Tommy.
Well, it actually happened in the third inning. I think the Earl of Bud was up on top of the dugout. And that's the song he came out to, was Cool Jerk. And he would do his little dance on top there. So that kind of became the theme song after that one. So I'd come out to that. It didn't work for it like Brian's did. I didn't hit as many home runs, so I tried it.
One last story, Greg. Remember we were at the hotel in Richmond, and all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off, and we had to clear out of our rooms? Was that because of a pizza that Tom and Rick Reed had ordered and set off the smoke detector?
I don't know if Princey would admit that or not. That was the rumor.
Oh, I'm sure it was us. There's no doubt. Now you can just say that kind of thing. Last 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said that.
Okay. Fair enough. And Claudia who was all part of War Memorial and Pilot Field as well. She wanted to again thank Brian for the great deal that he gave her son on the car last year.
Oh, hey, it's our pleasure always.
He loves it.
Thank you. Welcome, Claudia.
I remember sitting in the stands with Joe Overfield and Cy Williams, and they complaining to me about the Swisher kids and how the Swisher kids were running all over the place, and why can't you do anything about the Swisher kids? And then once upon a time, I looked on TV, and it was like, there's one of the Swisher kids.
Yes, there's Nick.
How about that?
All right. Well, thank you all very, very much, Brian. Yes. Great seeing you. Tommy Prince, we'll be waiting for our venison to be sent over to us soon.
Thanks for having us, guys. I appreciate it. Great seeing you.
Thank you all very much.
Great talking to you.
To commemorate the 100th season of Buffalo baseball in 1985, we established the Buffalo Baseball Hall of Fame Committee, and the ball club has been inducting members ever since. One of the members, Joe Overfield, the club historian, said he had enough material that year to write a book about the 100 seasons of Buffalo baseball. So he did. And I have fond memories of spending hours with him during the fall and winter of 1987 and 88, helping him with this daunting task. Nearly 30 years later, his son Jim, a retired history professor at the University of Vermont, called to ask if I would assist him, Paul Langendorfer, and Brian Frank, the founder of herdchronicles.com, with the task of updating and revising his dad's book. Some 3 years later, we have accomplished the task. How does it feel, Jim?
It feels like a small miracle. The group that got together in late 2017 imagined a project that we could probably finish off in a year and a half max. Project taken 3 years. And in the course of the time, what was imagined at first to be a paperback book on cheap paper, black and white photographs, has turned out to be something quite magnificent, really. Well designed by a book designer out in upstate New York. We've been able to harness any number of contributors, including local sports writers, Bud Bailey, Mike Harrington, Salome Arana of the Democrat and Chronicle. And it really has been a collaborative effort. I must say, I'm glad it's finally done, but it was a lot of fun doing it. And
Jim, talk about some of the memories you have of your dad when he put his book together, and so many people calling you about revising this book, and what led to that?
Well, my dad, pretty amazing guy, full-time job. Yeah, he was a dad, was very active, loved to play golf, a teenage son to raise. But all the time, he managed to turn himself into a highly respected and well-known amateur baseball historian. And he began publishing articles on Buffalo baseball history way back in the 1950s. The first team he was interested in was 1878 Buffalo Bisons. It was their second year as a professional club, and he ran into some information about the club while he was searching for titles down in Erie County City Hall, and became very interested, almost obsessed with the 1878 team. And he ended up spending hours every weekend down in the Grosvenor Library or the Buffalo History Museum doing his research. So he published books on that early team, and then he went on from there. Wrote many articles in local newspapers, scholarly journals, various baseball publications. But his great magnum opus was definitely the 100 seasons of Buffalo baseball, and it was a remarkable book. It was very successful. It went through several printings. I think for a self-published book was probably, a modest bestseller. And almost immediately after the book came out, people started telling him, "Well, Joe, you're going to have to do another. You're going to have to keep revising it." Or 5 years later, he said, "When are you going to do an update?" My dad always said, "Yeah, I'm going to do an update someday," but he never got around to it. After the book came out, he became interested in a number of other topics. He did a small book on Civil War, did a small book on the sinking of a steamer on Lake Superior, which had been captained by his great-grandfather, and all hands were lost on deck. And he wrote a whole bunch of articles for the Ball Club, as you know, for the Bisongram, quarterly newspaper, news magazine, that every issue contained a feature written by my dad, usually pretty long, that were called Bisongrams. And by then it was in the 1990s. He was getting older. By the end of the 1990s, his health began to fail. And he died in 2000, and there was no revision. And
Jim, look at. Oh, I'm sorry. Continue on.
Yeah, and for several years, I'd get emails from folks saying, "Hey, I read your dad's book. I'm a Bison fan. I'd like to do a revision of it. Bring it up to date." I said, "Fine, that's great." I was busy with my own work, and nothing ever came of it. But in 2017, my deck was cleared. I had time to do the work. The internet made available all these sources on newspapers and baseball history that made it possible for me to do a lot of the writing, even though I live in Essex Center, Vermont, and not in Buffalo. And so the direct inspiration for it was a book written by Paul Ranallo. I don't know if some of the old timers might remember Phil Ranallo, his dad, who was a sports columnist for the Buffalo Courier. And Paul, in 2016, I guess, published this book called "What's New, Harry?" It's a collection of his dad's columns that he'd written as a sports writer for the Buffalo Courier. And I thought to myself, "Hey, well, this would be a bad idea. Why don't we pull together all the articles my dad did for the Bisongram, and we'll turn that into a book, kind of like Paul did for his dad, Phil's columns." I brought up the idea with Paul Langendorfer, who had just written another book, Baseball in Buffalo. Give Paul's book a little boost here. Very nice book. And said, "Hey, why don't we do something more ambitious? Why don't we update 100 seasons?" And so one thing led to another. Called Mike Billoni, and he signed off on it. He's not only part of the story of the history of the Bisons, but did a lot of the writing for the book itself. And so the book got done. It's a book which kind of in general terms follows the format of my dad's book. The first part of our book covers the history of the Bisons from, well, Buffalo baseball, I should say, from 1857, when the first club teams began to form in Buffalo, while the sport was literally exploding across the in popularity across the country. And it goes all the way down to 2020, with each season of Buffalo baseball given a page or a little less or a little more than a page of the major developments. And that last section, yes, there's a story to be told for 2020, and Mike Harrington from the Buffalo News tells it with the arrival of the Blue Jays at Salem Field. Second part of my dad's book was essays that he wrote kind of on different aspects of the of Bison's history. And then the last section, which in many ways was the most impressive section, was a complete statistical breakdown of each year for each player on all those Bison's teams going back to 1877. An enormously difficult job for him to compile all that information in a pre-Google, almost pre-internet age. And our book follows that structure to a degree where, like I said, my dad's book, of course, ended in 1984. We're going all the way up to 2020 in part 1. Part 2 consists of 7 chapters, one on the stadiums, one on in which the Bisons played over the years, 14 of them. One on the players, sketches of Luke Easter, Ollie Carnegie, Jeff Manto. One on the managers, one on the owners and executives, going all the way back to the early ownership group in 1877, down to Bob and Mindy Rich. And then the 3 final chapters, chapter on fans, vendors, and other famous personalities from the who sat in the stands and watched the games.
I know.
And then Buffalo and baseball history, which is very rich subject. Buffalo made many contributions to the history of the sport. And then finally, the last chapter, 4 memorable games. I won't tell you what they are, but one happened in 1927, one happened in 1933, one happened in 1990, and the last one we talk about happened in 1991.
Hey, Jim, could we bring in Brian Frank real quick, who played such a key role in putting this book together? Brian, Mark, could you bring Brian up, please?
Yep, I'm here.
Brian, talk a little bit about what Joe Overfield and his original book meant to you, and then your work on putting this together, and how Herd Chronicles came to be.
Yeah, it was just a tremendous honor to help Jim with this. One of the big reasons that I'm interested in baseball history, and certainly Buffalo baseball history, is from reading Joe Overfield. The original 100 Seasons came out in 1985. I can remember even before that, back in 1983, when I first started going to Bison games. I lived in Springville. My parents would take us into the rock pile, and we'd always sit up the first base line so that we could have easy access to get down to the bullpens and watch the pitchers warm up down there. We always had a transistor radio, so I'm sure we were tuned into Pete Weber. And I remember looking forward to getting the game program, because Joe Overfield would usually have a story in there about Bison's history. And I was 11 years old at the time, and I was completely blown away reading about, you know, these great players and teams from Buffalo's past. And I remember one in particular. I think he had one about great players from Bison's history. And one of his little sketches was about Dan Bruthers, who, if people don't know, he was the first baseman when the Bisons had a National League team back in the 1880s, and he's in the Baseball Hall of Fame now. And I was just couldn't believe that Buffalo had had a National League team, had Hall of Famers play for those teams, and I was completely, you know, hooked on Joe Overfield's stories. And a couple years later, the original 100 Seasons came out, and I got a copy of that. I still have the original copy that I have. It's fallen apart and ripped and the bindings broke, but I still have it and carry it around with me. And the Herd Chronicles, definitely the original 100 Seasons was the inspiration that started my website, the Herd Chronicles, which has stories about Bison's players and games and playoff series from the past. And so kind of everything came full circle, and Jim asked me to help out with updating the book. And again, just a tremendous honor to be able to do that.
Well, Brian, thank you very much. You've been a tremendous asset. And I know for someone who was in on the original Hall of Fame committee meetings, they would have loved to have had you sit at around that table and hear their stories and hear you relate stories. So you're a tremendous writer and a great fan of the game. We thank you very much. And Jim, this has just been a tremendous honor, you know, working with you and putting this book out. And I think it's going to just be, you know, so many people that have received it in the mail or picked it up at the stores who have stopped in here tonight for autographs. They're just so honored and so happy. So I think we're going to put a lot of smiles on people's faces this holiday season. So thank you, gentlemen. The pandemic has made 2020 a year many would like to forget. It was the summer of our Bison. It was the summer when our Bisons were forced to cancel the entire season. But it was also the year the Toronto Blue Jays called Salem Field its home for the summer, marking the return of Major League Baseball in Buffalo in over 100 years. I was there as a cutout, sitting next to Joe Overfield as a cutout, and we would like to welcome the Bison's assistant general manager, Brad Bisbing, who was there through it all. Take it away, Pete Weber.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. And Brad, that had to be for your cohorts across the International League. You finally had the chance in your structure to have some baseball action. That had to be great in and of itself, not to mention it was Major League.
Yeah, you know, it was a roller coaster of a summer, that's for sure. And, you know, during the whole process, all I kept thinking about was we brought up Vin Scully earlier, and I know Mike Buchkowski said it in a press conference. You know, when he called Kurt Gibson's home run in '88, it was in a season that's been so improbable, the impossible happened. And, you know, it was from the lows to lows when we had to cancel and finally say that, you know, we weren't going to be able to play to the highs of being able to do something that hasn't been done in a century in our great city. And, you know, I fully felt the weight of it too on August 11th, you know, when that first game happened. And you know, it's a shame that we just couldn't have the fans there. And, you know, and you know, if we could have the fans there, the Blue Jays wouldn't have been there to begin with. But
right.
To be one of the few, and there's a few on this call that were able to be there in person for it, for the first game in 105 years, you know, was such a tremendous honor that I'll never forget. And, you know, I immediately, from the press conference to the 3 weeks of incredible work that was done at the ballpark, you know, I thought a lot of the, you know, a lot of the people that I work with at the Bisons, I've been with the Bisons now for coming up on 18 years, but I wasn't there in the early 90s when the push was really there to bring Major League Baseball to Buffalo. So, you know, when that first game happened, I thought of Booch and I thought of yourself, Pete, and Mike Billoni, and, you know, all the even Mike Parita and Bert Murray and Margaret Russo and the staff members that we had that were still working this year, or trying to get baseball to Buffalo in 2020, get our baseball, the Bison's baseball. What a special moment it would have been was for them to either be there as Booch and Mike were to those that, you know, were able to watch it on MLB Network that night. And it was truly special. And you're right. You know, I heard from a lot of the PR and marketing people from around the league saying, how jealous they were that, you know, they've been trying to do, you know, movie nights or dining out in the ballpark or anything to bring people to the ballpark. And here we are. We're going to host the taxi squad, which was the initial plan, to host them, and then to quickly shift gears to hosting the Blue Jays. It was a tremendous effort, by Mike Buchkowski and Anthony Sprague. And, I'd be remiss, a lot of people don't know this, that our director of stadium operations for many, many years, Tom Shrina, who many people know on this call, retired right before what would have been, the start of our season in April. And we had a brand new stadium operations guy, Brian Phillips. And the first thing that he was tasked to do was to help the Blue Jays get a ballpark ready to Major League standards in under 3 weeks. And well, I tell you, from everyone in the Blue Jays staff to the staff that was here at the ballpark, coming back and working in those conditions to get the ballpark ready, did just a tremendous job. And I thought it looked really well and was well received by media throughout the country.
Well, I have to agree with you, and some tears were rolling down this cheekbone when I watched that game on August 11th. And one of my proudest possessions is right behind me here, my Buffalo Blue Jays shirt. So that was absolutely great. Brad, thank you for adding some information on that, and also shout outs to the people who really, really had to work very hard, very fast to make that happen and help create a great chapter in this book, giving meaning to 2020.
Yeah, and like so many have said, and Brian, I have my copy of the 100 Seasons, and it seemed like a great way to cap off. And I'm glad, Mike, I know Mike and Jim, you talk about the project lasting 3 years and getting it done, but maybe that was destiny, that this 1 year could be the cap to your project. And what a tremendous job that you guys have done in producing this book and keeping, Jim, your father's work alive and bringing it back and sharing so many great stories with the Bisons fans. And, I'm excited to have my copy, and it'll stand next to the book that the glue's falling apart, but it'll stand right next to the 100 Seasons as the two books I turn to most throughout the season.
Thank you very much, Brad. And you're absolutely right. I think the timing of it, was it was like an answer to our prayers, because it allowed us to put into this book that entire 2020 season. Mike Harrington wrote a tremendous account. We have photos in there. Brian Frank, who was able to cover a couple of the games, we have his photos in. But it also allowed us to make edits, because during that period of time, Booch was promoted to president of Rich Baseball Operations, so we had to edit him out as GM and add Anthony Sprague in as GM. So it was a fun project, and I think people are going to really enjoy the read. As I look at the hundreds of people that are on the call, I see Erie County Clerk Mickey Kearns, who was a South District Council member, made a motion to rename the Bison address to 1 James D. Griffin Way, after the statue of former Mayor Jimmy Griffin was installed on the plaza. And there's a great story in the book on the building of what was then Pilot Field. Greg Peterson of Jamestown, who was instrumental in bringing baseball back to that city, the Tarp Skunks, and hopefully they'll be able to play this summer. And then longtime fans, Chris Smoka, Bob Pecoraro, and Vicky Christopher, thank you for being on here. And then a person who's in the book, Kaz Rodriguez and his family, back in the 1960s when the Bisons played at War Memorial Stadium, on Sunday games, they gave away a pony. It was called Pony Day. And amazingly, Kaz Rodriguez and his family won the pony. The story's in the book, and it's illustrated by a Mike Resigliano cartoon. A portion of the proceeds of the sale of each of the books and proceeds from the vintage Buffalo t-shirts from 26 shirts are going to the Joseph M. Overfield Memorial Baseball, Softball, Soccer, and Mentoring Program at the former War Memorial Stadium, now the Johnny B. Wiley Amateur Sports Pavilion. We're working on this program now during the winter with Cedric Holloway of Omega Mentoring and Willie Hutch Jones of his Education and Sports Program. They're both watching tonight. And the first player I went to with this idea was a former Bison pitcher in 1988 and 89, Morris Madden, who runs a similar program in the Carolinas. However, when he was here as a pitcher, this outstanding pitcher was a designated national anthem singer with the Hang With Them backup singers every time Dorn Taylor started a game at home. It's all yours, Greg and Pete. Take it away.
Thank you so much. And Morris, we've already talked before this actually went live to everybody, but you know how much I love your rendition of the national anthem, and I've sent it all over North America. It just grabs my heartstrings.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Well, I just remember working with Paul Wilmette on that, and we were on the road somewhere, and he was playing his guitar, and we went down into the stairwell, and you got better acoustics there. So we started doing our rendition of the national anthem, and it came out pretty good.
You know, we talked, Morris, about your singing abilities, but he's a guy who pitched in the big leagues, of course, with the Tigers and the Pirates. And Morris, that 1989 season, you win 12 games. You started 20 of them. You did some bullpen work.
Right.
What was Pilot Field like for a left-handed pitcher?
Pilot Field was great, man. Well, for one thing, we had some great defensive players, and I wasn't afraid to throw any pitches that, regardless of what Tommy Prince will tell you, I would throw whatever I wanted to throw, not what he suggested. But, you know, out there, man, is one of my favorite places to play. I did give up a few dingers there, but I had a decent ERA in those 12 games I won that year and did some relief work. And I think that was one of my best seasons actually playing there in 1989.
Morris, coming our way, I guess from Lawrence, South Carolina, right?
No, it's Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay, Charlotte. Now, but you're doing some work. Tell us about what you're doing with youth baseball.
Hey, my organization is called Naho Foundation of the Carolinas, and what we do is we cater to inner city kids from the ages of 4 to 18. We use baseball as the vehicle to get the kids into our program. But once they get into the program, we start them into some things that, well, from kindergarten to the 6th grade, we concentrate mostly on reading, teach them how to read, but all the while we're playing baseball and developing their baseball skills. From the 7th grade to the 12th grade, we concentrate on the junior-senior transition program so that they would have an idea of what they want to do and how they want to do it. And the best way for us to find out what they have an interest in is just get them in the outfield and mentor them and talk to them about what are your aspirations or what are your goals. And once we do that and find it out, well, we give them a trial period, see if that is exactly what they want to pursue. Say, for instance, if someone wanted to be a policeman or works in forensics or something like that, we will partner with our police department here and ask them if they can allow our kids to come down and see exactly what happens on a daily basis in whatever area they're talking about. And if they come back and tell us that that is exactly what they want to do, we try to give them every tool that we can to get them going in that direction. We also have tutoring programs. We have mentorship. We have an indoor facility there. We've built 2 baseball fields. We got a $7 million project going right now. And we got a 3rd field that's being built. So in a nutshell, that's exactly what we're doing now. We're just trying to make the best of our kids. We're not trying to make Major League Baseball players, but we're trying to make Major League citizens.
Well, Morris, Major League person in every sense of the word. And so no surprise that you're working with others to do just that and be a pro off the field, because that's what Morris Madden was, certainly when he was with Buffalo. And again, this book we're talking about, all kinds of stories, and takes us back, Morris, to, and Pete talked about it, Mike talked about your anthem, which was not only did you do it live, Morris, but tell us the story about Dorn Taylor. I was talking earlier today with Mike Buchkowski, who reminded me, Dorn Taylor, who was unbelievable when he was pitching for the Bisons. He didn't seem to lose at Pilot Field. He attributed that to your anthem. You had to play that anthem. That anthem had to be played when he pitched, either live or recorded.
Well, I actually paid Dorn for that. So, but no, he did tell me, he said every time he was going out to pitch, after he heard it the first time, That every time he goes out to pitch, he wanted to hear that anthem. And there was a opposing player by the name of Razor Shines who always went back to the dugout and said he did not want to hear that anthem because he has a bad day every time he hears that rendition. So it came out pretty good for us.
Morris, finally, and I know we're going to wrap things up here, and I guess it's apropos that we have the guy that would start a game with the anthem or as a pitcher, ending our guest segment. But the incredible story that Dorn Taylor, one time, I guess somebody messed up at Pilot Field and did not, he's pitching. They did not play the Morris Madden recorded version of the anthem. Booch had to run down with a cassette tape into the clubhouse after Dorn gives up a couple of first inning runs, and they're playing the cassette tape in the clubhouse.
Yeah, he's that guy. Dorn's that guy, and most baseball players are. I mean, you can ask Pete. We were talking one time. I was on the road, and I was talking with Pete about. He said, "Morris, what do you attribute to you having so much success at this particular venue?" I forgot where we were, but I said, "What I do is I have ice cream before the game. I go to a certain shop. I'd eat ice cream before the game, and I do pretty well. I did it the first time. I did it the next time. I did it again. So it was a habit for me to do that. And you just wouldn't believe the superstitions that baseball players have on and off the field."
Well,
Morris,
Pete and Mike, yeah, we're gonna.
All right.
Go ahead, Michael.
Greg, you have anything else for Morris?
Yeah, that's
Real
good.
quickly?
That's good. Go ahead, Mike.
All right, Morris, we just want to thank you very, very much. And I can assure you that we will have you up here because we are going to get you on a Zoom call with Willie Hutch Jones and the baseball team that he has put together for this program. And we'll have you up here when the Bisons come back to play and Brad Bisbing heard your anthem. So maybe we can get you back. We'll see if we can pull any strings and get you this thing before a Bison game this year. But Mo, I want to thank you very much for, from the bottom of our heart, for what you're doing for the kids in North and South Carolina and what you're going to be able to do to help us with the youth here in the inner city of Buffalo and Western New York.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all. I couldn't leave without saying hello to Mike Skoski and Ken Leaner and Marta and you, Mike, and Pete, and all you guys. And bring back so many great memories, and I can't wait to get back up there.
All right, Mo, we'll have you here. Hey,
all right, thank you.
Pete and Greg, before I close, do you have any closing remarks from your end? Peter?
Well, you know, I was going to ask Mo the trivia question to name the Hang With 'em hurlers. I think Logan Easley was one, wasn't he?
I think Logan was, yes. Logan
and
was.
for those that don't know, it was like you guys were they were the Blues Brothers to a degree. You would sing, and they would stand there at attention right behind you, but they wouldn't contribute anything.
Well, I think there's Logan Easley and Dave Rucker and Paul Womack. And I don't remember who else. Probably.
I think Medvin might have been involved.
Scott Medvin, yes, Scott Medvin, yes.
That was probably one of the first and only times any team would ever have anything like that. Another first, we didn't even get that in the book. That'll have to be in the next edition. Greg, we did have a question that was, Greg, we had a question, but it wasn't in the chat box. Someone held up a sign, I think it was Ken Lehner, and he said, Greg, where's your tie?
That's a Mark Bombard.
This is a casual event, Mr. Lehner. Thank you very much, though.
Pete, any closing remarks from you, Pete?
This was just a fantastic experience for me. And it brings back to me how close the relationships still are. I haven't done baseball on a regular basis since 1995. And still, many of my best friends are involved or were involved in the game. And I think that tells you a lot about the game itself and probably a lot about what baseball was like, at least for me in Buffalo.
Greg, closing
Mike,
remarks.
again, I just want to thank you and Pete. Jim, what an unbelievable, I thought his dad, you know, I didn't know his dad very well, but I just thought the first thing that came to my mind when I think of Joe Overfield was total class. A great man, and I think Jim is a chip off the old block. Brian, got to know him a little bit. He did a story about my short time in Buffalo, and At some point, we'll talk about the jersey that I got, thanks to Mike Billoni and Mike Buchkowski and the Rich family and Pete Weber when I left to come to Pittsburgh. But I can't thank you all enough. It was just an absolute treat. And I highly recommend this book. And I mean that because it will take you, even if you don't know much about Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo baseball fans will love it, but baseball fans in general, because there are so many neat stories as you leaf through it. It's so well done. Just a real treat for me to be involved in it. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Greg. And you saw on the screen, you could order them by Bisons.com. And Terry Serbone, from the merchandise manager at the Bisons, has been doing a marvelous job of sending these out. People get them, and I get all these phone calls of, you know, what it's beyond their expectations. So, hey, Kenny Lehner with a Knights cap on. Look at him. Okay, we want to thank all of our guests who worked with us to make this such a memorable evening. A very special thank you to Bob Costas for leading off this great show tonight. But this show would not have occurred if it were not for the excellent producing of Christina Apt and Mark Odeon and the publicity generated by James Apt. Thanks again, and remember, you can purchase the book at a number of local retail outlets like the Made in America stores, the Buffalo stores, Riverside Men's Shop, Talking Leaves, Dog Ears Bookstore, Oldie Editions, Bookworm in East Aurora, Niagara Frontier Publications in Grand Island, here at Bases Loaded in Cheektowaga, and at Bisons.com. And I've got to give a special thank you to my wife, Debbie, for putting up with me the last week or so as we put all this together. Thank you, my dear. And now we're going to close this in a perfect way for this virtual book launch. We're going to take off our caps, and listen to Morris Madden's rendition of our national anthem.
Rendition of our national anthem.
Wow.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Play ball.